Welcome to ULM. Today we see why China makes roads in smaller economies and what are the hidden factors behind the same. China's Belt and Road Initiative, often referred to as the BRI, has become one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects in modern history. Since its launch in 2013, the BRI has promised to reshape global trade, connect regions through modern infrastructure, and provide development opportunities to smaller, emerging economies that otherwise lack the resources to build such projects on their own. On paper, the initiative sounds like a win-win. China extends loans and expertise to build roads, ports, railways, and power plants, all of which should, in theory, bolster trade, drive economic growth, and create jobs in these smaller countries. But the reality is far more complex, and for many of these smaller economies, what began as an opportunity has often turned into a burden, one that some have likened to a modern-day form of imperialism through debt. One of the main ways China engages with smaller economies through the BRI is by providing financing for large infrastructure projects. For many of these countries, accessing global capital markets is difficult, and even if they could, the terms offered by Western financial institutions, or the International Monetary Fund, often referred to as the IMF, are often stringent, requiring significant economic reforms in exchange for loans. China, however, offers an alternative, often without the same demands for transparency or structural changes. As a result, countries eager to develop their economies quickly turn to China's deep pockets. Through state-owned banks, China provides loans to build highways, railroads, airports, and more. In return, China strengthens its global trade routes and economic ties, particularly in regions across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. For many smaller economies, the allure of these infrastructure projects is undeniable. Improved roads and ports mean better access to markets, both domestic and international. Countries that were once isolated due to poor infrastructure can, through Chinese investment, suddenly find themselves more integrated into the global economy. This could lead to increased trade, greater foreign investment, and ultimately, a boost to the local economy. But while the short-term gains are enticing, the long-term costs are proving to be far more troubling. One of the biggest concerns surrounding China's Belt and Road Initiative is the debt burden it places on smaller economies. Many of the loans provided by China are issued on commercial terms, meaning they come with interest rates that can be quite steep. For countries with fragile economies, repaying these loans can become a monumental challenge. Take Sri Lanka, for example. Sri Lanka borrowed heavily from China to build a new port in Hambantota. When it became clear that Sri Lanka couldn't keep up with its debt payments, the country was forced to lease the port to a Chinese company on a 99-year lease. This kind of situation has been described by critics as debt trap diplomacy, where China uses its financial leverage to gain control over key assets in foreign countries. This is where the concerns about sovereignty come into play. For countries unable to repay their debts, the risk is not just financial, it's political. When nations are forced to hand over strategic assets, such as ports or airports, it can erode their sovereignty. In essence, they lose control over important infrastructure that is vital to their national security and economic stability. And this isn't just a one-off case. Similar concerns have been raised in places like Djibouti, where China has financed the construction of a major port, and Laos, which is heavily indebted to China due to loans for railway construction. In both cases, these countries are now more dependent on China than ever before, reducing their negotiating power and potentially leading to long-term strategic vulnerabilities. Another issue with the Belt and Road Initiative is the limited local benefits that many of these countries actually see. On the surface, it might seem like these massive infrastructure projects would create jobs and stimulate the local economy, but the reality is often quite different. Many of the BRI projects rely heavily on Chinese contractors and Chinese labor. In some cases, entire construction crews are brought in from China to build these projects, leaving local workers out of the equation. Even when local labor is used, it's often for low-skilled jobs, while the more technical and higher-paying positions are filled by Chinese workers. This means that while the infrastructure is being built, the economic benefits do not always trickle down to the local population in the way that governments had hoped. Furthermore, these projects are often controlled by Chinese companies, not local ones. the financial and operational control stays in China's hands, meaning the host countries do not have as much ownership or say in how these projects are run. This creates a situation where the long-term benefits for the local economy are limited, and the dependence on China grows even stronger. Beyond the financial and economic concerns, there are also significant environmental and social risks associated with the Belt and Road Initiative. Many of the countries participating in the BRI have relatively weak environmental regulations, and in their eagerness to secure Chinese investment, they may overlook the potential environmental impact of these projects. This has led to issues like deforestation, pollution, and the destruction of local ecosystems. Large infrastructure projects often come with a heavy environmental cost, and without proper oversight, the negative effects can be long-lasting. Socially, the BRI can also disrupt local communities. In some cases, entire villages have been displaced to make way for new highways or railways. The rapid pace of development can leave local populations feeling alienated, particularly if they see few direct benefits from the projects. Additionally, there are concerns about transparency and corruption. In countries with weak governance structures, large infrastructure projects can become breeding grounds for corruption, with funds being siphoned off by local officials or inflated costs being passed on to the public. Perhaps one of the most troubling aspects of China's Belt and Road Initiative is the strategic dependence it creates. Once a country is heavily indebted to China, it has fewer options for economic and political maneuvering. This is particularly concerning in regions where China's geopolitical influence is growing. Smaller economies that once had the freedom to engage with a range of global powers may find themselves increasingly tied to China, both economically and diplomatically. This can put them in difficult positions, especially as global tensions between China and other major powers, such as the United States and India, continue to rise. For these smaller countries, navigating the competing interests of global superpowers becomes a delicate balancing act. In conclusion, while China's Belt and Road Initiative promises to bring development and connectivity to smaller economies, the long-term costs can be significant. The debt burdens, loss of sovereignty, environmental degradation, and strategic dependence that come with these projects are serious concerns that cannot be ignored. For many countries, the BRI represents an opportunity to leapfrog their way into the global economy, but the price they pay may be far higher than they initially anticipated. It's a complicated relationship, one that offers both hope and risk in equal measure. Whether the benefits outweigh the negatives remains to be seen, but for now, the small economies involved in the BRI must carefully navigate the intricate web of opportunities and challenges that China's ambitious global strategy presents. See you with another video. Subscribe for more. Make the background music dark.